Evelyn. The camera pans across her penthouse office. Polished oak, minimalist decor, a skyline view. Awards line the shelf. Forbes 40 Under 40, Best Tech CEO of the Year, Most Inspiring Woman in Business. Her assistant knocks timidly before entering. Evelyn gives a practiced smile, efficient and flawless. But when the door shuts, and the room is silent again, Evelyn presses her hand to her chest. Her breathing is shallow. She opens her phone and stares at her calendar. Every block filled. No room to break. No room to feel. In the mirror behind her, the woman reflected seems robotic. And maybe that's the point. After all, vulnerability is a liability. Luca. Under the yellow hum of a janitor's closet, Luca lugs a mop bucket into another dark corridor. He wears earbuds, but no music plays. He just wants the illusion of being unreachable. Years ago, he sold a painting to a gallery in Berlin. His professors told him he had something raw. But now, each night, he walks past framed office art, bland prints that mock what he once dared to create. At home, unfinished canvases lean against the walls. Some are turned backward, as if ashamed. Luca tells himself he'll paint again soon. Maybe when he gets a real weekend off. Maybe when the ache in his back lets up. Maybe when the light returns. Mira. Phone camera on. Ring light glowing. Mira grins. Hey, my beautiful people. Today's tip is about protecting your peace. Her voice is honey. Her apartment pastel perfect. She ends the video, hits save, and the glow disappears, not from the light, but from her face. She checks her notifications. Thousands of likes. A few sponsorship emails. Nothing from her sister. Nothing from that guy who said he cared. She scrolls past a photo of her on the beach, laughing, glowing. But she remembers how empty she felt that day. A single comment catches her eye. You always look so happy. I wish I had your life. Mira stares at it for a long time, then turns the phone face down. 3 lives, 3 masks. To the world, they look functional, successful, aspirational. But behind closed doors, something else is unraveling. Something silent, something deep. Not quite depression, not quite fear. More like a quiet, persistent question none of them can shake. Is this all there is? Evelyn sat in the back of her chauffeur-driven car, eyes glazed as she stared out the tinted window. The city buzzed past like static. Her phone vibrated. Another meeting invite, another investor request. She didn't respond. At the next stoplight, her driver hit the brakes a little too hard. Coffee spilled across Evelyn's designer skirt. I'm so sorry, Mom, he stammered. But Evelyn didn't blink, didn't flinch. She simply whispered, it's fine, and stared at the spreading stain like it had betrayed her. Later, in the boardroom, she gave a flawless presentation. Her voice sharp, her slides perfect. But during applause, her hand began to tremble, almost imperceptibly, until she clenched her fist beneath the table. That night, she booked a session with a high-end therapist she'd been dodging for months. She barely got 5 minutes in before saying, I think I'm just tired. The therapist nodded gently. Tired or hollow? Evelyn's smile faltered. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Luca walked past a downtown art gallery on his break. Through the glass, he saw a piece that looked eerily similar to one he painted 10 years ago, a burst of red across fractured gray. He lingered. A couple stood admiring it. It's called Stifled Horizon, one read. The artist said it represents emotional captivity. Luca's breath caught. He hadn't heard those words in years. His words, from a journal he'd long since thrown away. He didn't go inside, just stood there for a while, then quietly kept walking, mop bucket trailing behind like a ball and chain. That evening, his neighbor, an elderly man named Harold, knocked and asked if Luca could help carry some groceries. As they unpacked, Harold pointed at one of Luca's old paintings propped in the hallway. You do these? I used to. Harold smiled. That's a shame. You look like someone who still needs to. Mira wandered a quiet part of town she rarely filmed in. No murals, no coffee shops with aesthetic lighting, just an old bookstore with a bell on the door and a cat on the windowsill. She stepped inside and browsed aimlessly. A stranger, a woman in her 60s, tapped her shoulder. You dropped this, she said, handing Mira a small sticky note that had fallen from a book. The note read, stop curating yourself. Start meeting yourself. Mira stared at it throat tight. When she looked up, the woman was already gone. Later that night Mira filmed a story for her followers. But halfway through, she paused. Her voice cracked. She deleted the clip, then stared at her reflection on the dark screen. Who even are you when no one's watching? She whispered. 3 small moments, none catastrophic, none loud, but each left a mark, like a hairline fracture across porcelain. And yet, instead of confronting the break, they all retreated. Not because they were cowards, but because something deep, ancient, and unseen whispered, don't move, don't question, stay where it's safe. But what they didn't know yet was, that voice wasn't theirs. The morning light spilled across Evelyn's sleek desk. Her smartwatch chimed softly. Great job managing stress this week, it buzzed cheerfully. Evelyn forced a smile, but the praise felt hollow. a cold pat on the head from a machine that didn't understand the storm beneath her calm. Meanwhile, Luca stood silently in the janitor's closet, overhearing a conversation. "Lucas, the quietest guy here," the supervisor said. "Perfect for the night shift. We're even thinking about promoting him, as long as he keeps his head down." The words hung in the stale air like a noose. Luca nodded, swallowing a bitter truth. Silence was his only currency. Across town, Mira scrolled through her social feed. The algorithm was relentless, rewarding every smile, every perfectly posed selfie. Engagement up 12%, her phone notified her. But inside, the smile was a mask stitched tight over a hollow space. That evening, each received an unexpected message, a whisper of something deeper, something sinister. A shadowy figure appeared on Evelyn's doorstep, leaving behind a single note. "Do you think this is comfort, or control?" Luca found a folded piece of paper tucked into his locker. "Silence isn't peace, it's a cage." Mira woke to a text from an unknown number. "Your followers see the mask. But who sees you?" They looked around, searching for the source, but no one was there. The message was clear: their lives were being shaped not just by choice, but by an unseen force. A force that rewarded conformity, punished risk, and kept them locked in place. A force known only as the comfort system. It wasn't just a metaphor. It was a psychological trap engineered by culture, technology, and expectation, designed to reward quiet obedience, discourage rebellion, and keep misery comfortably hidden behind polished FADES. The more they coped, the more the system praised them. The more they tried to break free, the tighter it squeezed. It was subtle, insidious, and almost impossible to see until it was too late. For a moment, a brief, golden flicker, they each dared to imagine there was something more. Evelyn stood barefoot in a pinewood meditation hall, surrounded by silence so complete it roared in her ears. No emails, no metrics, no one to impress. She thought she'd unravel, but instead she exhaled. For the first time in years, her breath wasn't a weapon, it was a whisper. She scribbled in her journal, "I'm not a brand, I'm a woman." But when she returned to the office on Monday, something had shifted, not in her, but around her. The board looked at her with narrowed eyes. "You seemed off," one of them said. Her assistant hesitated when handing her the itinerary, and her calendar, suddenly packed with mandatory performance recalibrations. Behind closed doors, whispers started. "Maybe she's cracking." Luca dug through his storage closet and pulled out a dusty crate, old brushes, stiff with time. He set up a canvas under a flickering bulb and began to paint. His hand trembled. The strokes were messy, furious, alive. Colors bled, edges warped. But it was him. He felt something, not joy, but defiance. At work the next day, he arrived late, paint still under his fingernails. His supervisor frowned. "You're losing focus, Luca. Do you want this job or not?" That evening, he came home to a notice pinned to his door: eviction. The landlord had suddenly reconsidered the lease agreement. Coincidence or correction? Mira pressed the delete button on her account. The app vanished. Her heart raced. No more filters, no more fakeness, no more strangers mistaking her persona for her soul. She walked outside, no makeup, phone on silent. She sat on a bench in the park and watched people, really watched. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like content. She felt like a person. But later that night, she texted her best friend, "Can we talk?" "No cameras, just us." No reply. She sent another, then another. The next day, her friend unfollowed her and posted a story. "Some people only reach out when they're falling apart. Don't let energy leeches back in." Mira stared at the screen, throat burning. The mask was gone, and now they didn't want her anymore. 3 sparks of rebellion, 3 flickers of truth, and the system saw it all. It doesn't strike with thunder, it doesn't scream. It tightens the leash with smiles, algorithms, and polite punishment. It knows how to push you back into your role, not with cruelty, but with consequences. They didn't fail. They triggered the trap. The comfort system was never meant to kill them, only to make them quietly surrender. The punishment wasn't just external. It woke something inside them, something older, something buried. The voices weren't new, they were echoes. Evelyn sat alone in her luxury condo, wine untouched, laptop closed. Her phone buzzed again, the board demanding leadership re-evaluation, but her mind was elsewhere. She remembered her mother's face, always poised, always rehearsed. "I don't care how you feel, Evelyn," she once said, dabbing concealer under Evelyn's teary eyes before a school recital. "You don't cry in front of people, you perform." At 8, Evelyn learned emotions were threats. At 28, she learned how to fake them, on stage. Now, at 39, she couldn't tell which version of herself was real, the poised CEO, or the little girl begging to be seen. Luca packed his things into a second-hand suitcase. His apartment wasn't much, but it had been his cave of quiet shame. Now it was gone. As he folded a frayed hoodie, a memory surfaced, one he hadn't thought of in years. High school, an art show, his painting, chaotic, dark, Raw was disqualified. His teacher took him aside. This is too emotional. Art should be pleasant, palatable, something that sells. He remembered nodding, apologizing, painting sunsets for the next 6 months. That's when it began. He wasn't creating anymore. He was complying. Mira stared at her blank phone screen. No messages, no alerts, just silence. She remembered sitting at the dinner table as a teenager, trying to open up to her father about how empty she felt at school. He barely looked up from his newspaper. No one likes sad girls, Mira, he muttered. Smile, you'll get further in life. And so she did. She smiled when her first boyfriend cheated. She smiled through anxiety attacks in college. She smiled on camera while spiraling inside. She didn't remember when the smile stopped being a choice and became a reflex, an armor that smiled even when her soul screamed. 3 childhoods, 3 origin stories, and 1 realization: they were never just living their lives. They were trained to be palatable, to be professional, to be perfect. Their misery wasn't an accident. It was the outcome of an invisible curriculum, taught by families, schools, workplaces, society, all designed to reward predictability and punish presence. They were never told to be themselves. They were told to be liked. Now, as they each sat alone, phone in hand, suitcase packed, mask crumbling, they started to feel it. The fight wasn't just against the system outside them. It was against the one inside them, the one that still whispered, obey, smile, stay small. It started quietly, not as coincidence, as a pull. Evelyn sat alone at a cafe for the first time in years. No team, no meetings, no email alerts. She sipped tea, trying to feel normal, but her hands trembled. The barista, a soft-spoken woman with ink-stained fingertips, slid a napkin under her cup. Not a number, not a smiley face, just a quote scribbled in black ink. You were not made to repeat, you were made to awaken. Evelyn looked up, but the woman had already disappeared into the back. When Evelyn flipped the napkin over, she found a strange symbol, a broken circle with a dot in the center. Luca rode the train, duffel bag at his feet, nowhere to go. He pulled a worn book from the bottom, The Myth of Normal. A stranger had handed it to him days earlier, saying, "You look like someone who needs this." Inside the front cover, a note was scrawled, "You're not broken, the system is." Below it, the same symbol Evelyn saw, a broken circle, dot in the center. That evening, while wandering the city, he passed a building with graffiti sprawled across the brick in elegant, chaotic script, the unwritten gather where silence used to win. Luca paused. The symbol was spray painted beneath it. Mira had deleted her account, deleted the mask, and still, no one reached out. She wandered into a small used bookstore, the same one from before, and this time, a man in a wide-brimmed hat handed her a thin, weathered pamphlet. No title, no cover. Inside were phrases that felt too personal to be random. You were never meant to be content. You were meant to be conscious. Your misery was monetized. Escape requires betrayal of the version of you they applauded. On the last page, a map, 3 dots marked across the city. One of them pulsed faintly with the same broken circle symbol. That night, all 3 arrived at the same location, a dim, abandoned lecture hall in the old part of town. Flickering lights, echoing footsteps. They didn't know each other, didn't speak, but something inside them recognized the others immediately, not by face, but by frequency. A woman in her 40s stood at the front of the room, calm, undeniable. She wore no name tag, no title, just a pendant around her neck, the symbol. "We are called the Unwritten," she said, "because we choose not to live by the scripts given to us. You are here because you've begun to see it, the comfort system. It's not just a social pattern, it's a design, built to keep you predictable, happy enough to comply, miserable enough to never leave." The room fell silent. Evelyn clenched her fists. Luca leaned forward. Mira's breath caught in her throat. "Your suffering," the woman continued, "wasn't weakness. It was resistance trying to wake you up." The room was dim, lit only by flickering candles placed in a circle. The woman from the Unwritten stood in the center. Her voice was calm, but it cut like a blade. "Before you can escape the system, you must meet the one who serves it, the one wearing your face." Evelyn was handed a mirror, not sleek, not modern, old, with a cracked edge, and a frame that looked like it had survived a fire. She stared into it and saw the image she'd perfected, the poised executive, calm and in control. But then the illusion wavered. In its place, she saw herself at 8 years old, holding back tears at her mother's command. Then 28, receiving applause after a keynote speech, heart-thudding in terror. Then 39, alone in a hotel bathroom, having a panic attack while the world praised her, grace under pressure. The woman in the mirror wasn't real. She was armor, polished, market-tested, and utterly exhausted. Evelyn fell to her knees. "I built her so they wouldn't kill the real me," she whispered. Luca stood in front of a canvas, blank, except for one sentence written in charcoal. "Who did you pretend to be so they wouldn't leave?" He picked up a brush, but his hand froze. His mind filled with images, his father shaking his head at his paintings, his ex saying, "Get a real job." His younger self thrilled at an art scholarship, only to turn it down to play it safe. He saw the man he'd become, quiet, invisible, apologetic. He dipped the brush in red and slashed across the canvas, again and again, until the sentence vanished, not in surrender, in defiance. Mira was guided into a dark room, with a single spotlight and a chair. "Speak," said a voice from above. No script, no filter. She tried. Her throat tightened. Every time she opened her mouth, her influencer voice came out, cheerful, polished, hollow. She screamed. The sound cracked through the silence like breaking glass. Then, silence. Then, tears. She sat in that chair for what felt like hours, until finally, a whisper came, "I don't know who I am." And for the first time in years, that felt like truth, not failure. The leader of the unwritten gathered them once more. "You've seen the mask. You've spoken to it. Now you know. It wasn't built by your enemies. It was built by your need to survive. But the mask cannot walk through the next door. Only you can." The three looked at one another, hollowed out, stripped down, and shaking, but alive. This wasn't the end of the illusion. It was the beginning of its death. They were warned, to kill the false self, you must do something it would never dare. Not a gesture, not a quote, a rebellion. The unwritten didn't offer comfort. They offered fire. Evelyn stood in front of the boardroom where she had won battles with poise and PowerPoint, but this time, she carried no briefcase, only a printed resignation letter in a shaking hand. She walked in as the CFO was presenting. Without waiting, she stood at the head of the table. Her voice didn't tremble, it cracked like thunder. "I resign, not for another job, not for mental health. I resign because I refuse to be a machine pretending to be a woman." Gasps. The CEO tried to interrupt. A junior exec mouthed, "Are you okay?" She smiled for real this time, not with her mouth, but with her freedom. As she walked out, her security badge fell from her hand like a broken chain. Luca returned to the studio he hadn't entered in years, now just storage for mops and old chairs. The walls still held some of his early paintings, timid things full of pastel skies and sad trees. He brought 2 buckets, one with paint, one with gasoline. The first stroke was thick, violent. Red slashed across the canvas like blood. He poured, splattered, screamed, until the room smelled of rebellion. Then, he struck a match, but just as he raised it, he paused. Not out of fear, out of clarity. Instead of fire, he walked to the corner, pulled out a new canvas and began to paint. Not for approval, not for sale, not for survival. For the first time, just to say something true. Mira went live. Her followers were expecting another skincare routine, or an aesthetic morning montage. Instead, they saw her face. Raw, no filter, puffy eyes. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "I lied. I don't feel beautiful. I don't feel happy. And every smile I've sold you is a prison I built for myself." The comments exploded. Confusion, concern, cruelty. She stared into the camera. "You were never the problem. The problem was that I thought I had to be perfect to be loved." Then she deleted her account. Not paused. Deleted. Every post, every partnership, every carefully curated lie. Gone. She shut the laptop and sobbed. But this time, the tears weren't hollow. That night, all 3 sat alone. Not heroic, not celebrated, shunned, afraid, free. The system didn't wait long. Evelyn's resignation made headlines. Unstable and dramatic. Luca was evicted for vandalism. Mira received a cease and desist from her last sponsor. The message was clear: return to your role, or pay the price. But none of them moved. Not this time. Their masks were dead. And from the ashes, something unknown, and real, was beginning to stir. The ritual was over, but the system hadn't fallen. It had simply let go. Like a drug dealer watching an addict walk away, smirking, knowing they'll be back. Evelyn sat in her apartment, surrounded by silence. No emails, no meetings, no notifications. At first, it felt peaceful. Then it felt like death. Her hands shook with muscle memory, reaching for a phone that no longer buzzed. Her identity, once reinforced by every calendar invite, now floated like dust in the air. She tried reading, tried yoga, tried staring out the window for hours. But the worst moment, the one that broke her, she saw a news article quoting her former firm. "We wish Evelyn the best as she takes time for personal healing. We are confident in our new leadership." They'd rewritten her story, branded her breakdown as self-care, replaced her before the chair had cooled. She screamed, then laughed, then cried, not for them. For how long she believed she needed them to exist. Luca was sleeping on a friend's couch. Again, the high from painting had vanished. He stared at the new canvas, every night, waiting for lightning. Instead, he got silence, doubt, and shame. His mind whispered, "You think you're free now. You just burned the last bridge. You'll be forgotten." But then a message. It wasn't from a gallery, not a critic, just a stranger. A woman had seen a photo of his vandalized painting circulating online, and said it made her cry. It looked like how I felt. "Thank you." He stared at the message for an hour, not because it was praise, because it was honest. For the first time, he understood, art didn't need applause, it needed truth. Mira had no followers now, no tags, no brands. She walked the city in oversized clothes, and no makeup, unrecognized. For days, she felt invisible. Then one night, at a local bookstore, someone tapped her shoulder. A girl, no older than 15, whispered, "You're the one from that video, right? You said you weren't okay." Mira nodded. The girl hugged her tight, said nothing else, just left. Mira sat down on the floor and cried, right there between the shelves. Not because she was broken, because she felt seen, not scrolled past. For the first time, all three stopped performing. They didn't need approval, or applause, or proof. And without realizing it, they stopped feeding their misery. Because misery is not just pain, it's the addiction to pretending you're not in pain. Their old selves were dead, but their new selves, still babies, gasping for breath, crying in the dark, but alive. The comfort system had no alarms, no collapse, no villains dragged into the light. It simply faded from their lives, but it still hummed around them, on phones, in ads, in boardrooms, behind smiles. And yet, Evelyn, Luca, and Mira weren't running anymore. They walked slower now, with eyes open, but a question haunted them all. If this was a system, who built it? Evelyn found her answer first. She was volunteering at a local community center, helping young women practice public speaking. One girl, sharp, ambitious, reminded her of herself. But every time the girl stumbled, Evelyn winced. Not out of concern, out of disgust. A voice rose inside her. You have to be perfect. Don't cry, don't tremble, control it. She froze. That voice wasn't hers, it was her mother's. And in that moment, Evelyn saw it. She wasn't just raised in the comfort system, she had started enforcing it herself. Without knowing it, she had passed it on. Luca noticed it at a diner. He overheard a father scolding his kid for doodling on a placemat. Art doesn't pay bills. Finish your food. And Luca didn't just flinch. He wanted to agree, not because it was true, but because it had been true for him. He saw it clearly now. The system wasn't a monster in the shadows. It was a culture of wounded people teaching their pain as truth. Mira sat alone in a park. No selfies, no filters, just a notebook. She wrote, I used to think misery was a prison built around me, but it wasn't. It was a script I kept reading aloud, because everyone else did too. The final lie wasn't that I was unhappy, it was that being seen meant being liked. She looked up. Across the field, Evelyn and Luca were approaching. They hadn't spoken in weeks, but now, without words, they sat beside her. They didn't talk about the system, they didn't need to. They had seen its final form, not an institution, not a villain, but an identity, one carefully constructed, rewarded, and defended by themselves. They had agreed to be who the world needed them to be until they didn't. The last shot is simple, the three of them walking, not together, but in the same direction, alone, uncertain, but finally free. Behind them, the world continues spinning, polished, predictable, plastic, but ahead, unwritten,